It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
When we empower our children, when we give them that autonomy, when we give them that belief, when we give them the sense of competence and the sense that they are enough, that we love them as they are, the voice that they hear as they mature will not be ours, it will be theirs, because we've allowed them to have a voice in the first place.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
So we've just had a revelation. We've just realised something that we didn't realise before. Well, you have anyway.
Well, I changed my earrings today.
Yeah.
And I've got ones with backings on them, and these headphones are literally giving me acupuncture points.
We can't do the podcast if you're wearing your earrings.
Oh my goodness.
I hope we can get through this.
Okay.
I believe in you. I believe in you. G'day, it's Justin and Kylie. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, all of October. We're not going to talk about mental illnesses every single day, but we're going to talk about issues related to mental health and how we can help our kids to be strong, to be emotionally capable, resilient, have high levels of well-being, how we can help to build their sense of self. And Kylie, today what I want to focus on are the words that we say that become our children's inner voice. The way that the way that we talk to our children becomes what they actually hear on the inside.
Of all the conversations I had growing up, there are two things that were repeatedly said to me, one by my mum and one by my grandma when I was younger, that still to this day haunt me.
Yeah.
My mum, whenever I would be eating a chocolate and just enjoying it with absolute delight.
Let me guess. Don't slush your food.
No, she didn't. She would say if I kept eating food like that, one day I would have thighs like hers.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And when you reflect on that, or when you're eating chocolate now, does that come back to you? Like, how does that influence and affect you now?
It actually is not so much about when I'm eating. It's about what I see in the mirror. Because I do have thighs like her now. And clearly that's a bad thing. Because my mother saw
I would
it as a
disagree.
bad thing.
I would disagree. You definitely don't have thighs like your mum. I'm just saying that. I feel like I have to say that. But no, I'm truly saying it. What was your grandma's comment?
My nan was not a religious woman at all. She actually really struggled with the fact that my family chose to be religious, and we lived with them for a period of time when we moved over from New Zealand to Australia. And often she would catch me and my sister fighting. And because I was the oldest, she would always say, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Christian girls don't act like that." And so whenever I do anything wrong or I say the wrong thing, there's just that sense of shame. Instead of having the acknowledgement that I'm a learning, growing, evolving person, there's this sense of I'm a bad person.
So I had a question written down here that I haven't shown you, but I wanted to ask you, what does your critical inner voice sound like? Because you know how we've always got a voice going in our head, and sometimes it's really critical. Sometimes it really castigates us and gives us a hard time. It can be so capricious. When you hear that critical inner voice, what does it sound like? Or who does it sound like?
My nan, actually.
Yeah, right. It sounds like a sort of a bitter old woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I think of the times where I'm critical of myself, it sounds like one of three people. I've got to say, my parents are just wonderful people. If they heard me saying this, they'd be crushed. And yet, it's probably true for almost all of us. It's not unique just to my folks or your folks or whatever. Yeah. But so often I hear my mum's voice, especially when I'm not doing things well enough. There's that expectation that I've got to be perfect. I need to do it better. And I just keep on hearing my mum's critical, high expectation voice pushing and pushing and pushing for more and more and more. But every now and again, I also hear my dad's voice. That's the cranky voice. And because my dad, he gets a bit grumpy every now and again. And the third voice is just me. Sometimes it's almost like I've internalized their voices and it's become a hybrid voice that's mine. And regardless of what it is, it's those same messages that I was getting when I was a kid. And I want to really emphasize in this podcast what we can do to reduce the likelihood that our children, when they're hearing those voices as they get older, reduce the likelihood that it's our voice, help them to develop their own inner voice and hopefully have a much healthier inner voice than the one that we could so easily give them if we're not careful.
There's a quote by Peggy O'Mara, and she actually said, the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. And there was another thing that was said to me. It was literally only said to me once. But my mum looked at my handwriting one day and compared it to my best friend who had the most magnificent, like glorious writing.
Right.
And she said, why can't you write like her?
Oh.
And just again, that comparison.
Yeah.
And so as I do things creatively, I'm constantly looking around me to go, how come I can't do it like that?
Yeah, there's that whole thing of I could just never do enough. I could never be enough. I was never good enough. But then there's also that sense of frustration.
For me, when I think about the things that we're sharing, there's this acknowledgement that the things that they said to us was actually more a reflection of who they were and how they felt about them.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, just last week I was getting cranky at you because you were on your screen. You've been saying to me that you want to go to the gym and you want to improve your eating, and I've been following you up on that. Like, so what are you going to do? When are you going to go to the gym? When are you going to improve your eating? But it occurred to me that the two things that I seem to talk to you about the most are the two things that I'm struggling with the most myself. That is, I've let myself go physically and I'm on my screen too much. So it's so fascinating that you say that we're reflecting those things. Regardless, though, that becomes the inner voice. Other people, I mean, how old were you before you finally stopped worrying about what your parents thought? For me, I reckon I was 40, maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, but somewhere around there. So let's talk about how we can have empowering conversations with our children that help them believe in themselves and that give them the confidence in their own inner voice that they don't hear us or a nagging version of us throughout the rest of their lives.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful to actually go to the other end of the spectrum, to actually look at what is the voice we actually want our kids to hear and then work our way backwards. How do we achieve that?
Yeah, so I've got three ideas that will help us to do that, and that's why I use that word empowerment, because I don't want to hear a critical inner voice. I want to hear an empowering, strengthening voice.
Yeah, I want to know that my children, when they're faced with a challenge, aren't going to see themselves or hear that voice that says, you've got no hope. There's no chance you're going to get through this, and actually have a voice that says, you've got this. Yeah,
a resilience building, hope building voice. So I've got three ideas that I think are going to help, and they tie in with what we call our basic psychological needs. Almost all the time in the podcast, I'm talking about these needs, and the new book that I'm writing is about them as well. So I reckon we should explore three different conversation principles that can help to build a strong, hopeful, resilient inner voice in our kids, and hopefully reduce the likelihood that they're going to need something like Mental Health Awareness Month to get through.
What's number one?
So the first one relates to what we would call the relatedness need, the need to belong, the need to feel connected and close to someone. When we're talking about this, we're talking about the voice that promotes belonging and understanding and empathy. So when our children are having a hard time, or they're being challenged, or they're being challenging, that is when our kids are driving us up the wall, the kind of language that we often use distances them from us. So we say, stop it, calm down, be quiet, go to your room, I've had enough, I can't stand it anymore, you're driving me crazy. We say all those kinds of things, and obviously the voice that they're hearing is one that's deeply critical and absolutely awful. When you think about when our children are struggling and we actually get it right and we give them that belonging, empathic, understanding voice, what kind of things would our kids be hearing instead?
Well, first of all, it's not actually heard, it's felt, it's that hug, it's that pulling them close into us physically.
Yeah.
And then just an acknowledgement that they're having a hard time right now.
That's exactly the line I was going to use. This was not pre-planned, but I was literally going to say, there's something about when somebody says to you, you're having such a hard time right now. This is so tough, isn't it? And it's an inclusive voice. It's, I see you, I value you, I get what you're experiencing. And what it does is it builds closeness, it builds comfort, it lets our kids know that the experiences, the emotions they're having are a normal and healthy part of the human experience, and that there's somebody beside them to guide them through it. So that's the first part of getting this voice right. It's a voice that encourages closeness, belonging, empathy, and understanding.
What's number two?
This is where we actually tap into the second basic psychological need that our kids have, and that is a sense of competence. So normally when our children are losing it, when they're behaving in unhappy, unhealthy, drive you up the wall kind of ways, they're doing it because they are experiencing stress. They don't have the skills and the capacity to meet the moment. Right? That's when they show a lack of resilience. That's when they fall apart. They don't have the skills and the capacity to deal with what is landing on them, whether it's a big brother or sister who's giving them a hard time, or overwhelming homework and schoolwork stress, or not getting picked for the team, or the bedroom being such a mess they can't deal with it on their own, whatever it is, it's too big for them. They end up in this big emotional meltdown, and our job there is not just to connect with them and help them to feel safe emotionally, but it's also to let them know that we believe in their capacity. And so as we say, this is really hard, or you're really worried, or I get what's going on for you, I can see it, come here and be close to me and let me give you a hug, we promote competence and capability beliefs. I mean, you think about it, that inner voice. Imagine if you've got an inner voice that believes in you by saying things like, you've got this, or I believe in you, or there is a way forward and you know how to get there. It's about having that conversation with them where you're expressing a belief in their ability to get things right. With an older teenager, you might say, you're in a really tough spot here, but I know that you've been taught well and that you know the way forward from here. Now, we'll still support them. We'll still say, what do you need? How can I help? And all that kind of thing, which brings us close. But we're expressing our confidence in their capacity. That's really what we're looking at here.
I was reflecting the other morning as I was writing in my journal about this exact thing, and having watched a few of our children really have to wrestle with some of the decisions that they've been making in their lives, and how excruciatingly painful it is as a parent watching them go through that wrestle and wanting to fix it for them. And yet there is just something so exquisite about coming through the other end and seeing them come to their own understanding or their own, kind of success as they move through that.
Yeah, when they say, I've done it.
But as a parent, you want to fix it. You don't want them to have to wrestle, and yet the wrestle is where the learning and the growth is.
I was talking to our eldest daughter just the other day, Chanel. She's in her early 20s, been married for a couple of years, and she was grappling with something and trying to figure things out. And I just said to her, don't you just wish that you knew the end from the beginning? Wouldn't it be amazing if we knew how this was going to play out? And she said, so badly. And that was that whole belonging and understanding and empathy. And then I just said to her, I know that you'll figure this out. I know that you'll figure this out. You've got this. And I didn't have to fix it. And there was something in our conversation where she sensed the belief that I have in her. And there was a resilience response. She was like, yeah, I know. We'll get there. It'll take some time, but we'll get there.
But do I have to be an adult?
Yeah, I know.
Do I have to be an adult? What's number 3?
So the third part of this is related to the third basic psychological need that our kids have, and that is a need for autonomy. We need to encourage autonomy. And this is why it makes such a difference, because when I say to you, I know it's hard, give us a hug, I'm right here for you. You know what? I believe in you. I know you've got this. What do you think? Where do you reckon we should go from here? How can I help? What would be the best thing for us to do next? That conversation essentially says you can be the master of your destiny. The answer is inside you. You've got my full support. I'm standing here and I won't let you go astray. Like if you're going to say something really, really dumb, I'll just sort of wind you back in and say, well, I wonder what would happen if you did that. Can you think of any other ideas that might be a little safer, a little less risky? So as parents, we get to say, I believe in you. I'm going to give you the wheel and let you steer the car. But as a parent, based on your age or your experience or your maturity, I am still going to stay close just so that I can guide the process in case you kind of go way off track. But those 3 things, building the relationship, the sense of belonging, saying I believe in you, supporting that sense of competence, and really encouraging autonomy, those 3 elements are the kinds of conversations that build a strong and positive inner voice for our kids. And if our voice becomes their inner voice, that's the kind of voice we want them to hear, right? That's what we're after.
I love it.
Thanks, hun. I love that you're looking at me like I said something that was really good.
I have a little bit of an off-track question to ask. We started the conversation about our own inner voice, and for many of us, it's quite negative. How do we change that?
Wow.
Because the reality is it's not our voice. So how do we find our own voice?
Yeah, quite often it's not our voice, it's someone else's. We find our own voice by doing a couple of things, and they tie in with the principles that I've just shared. So when it comes to that idea of belonging and empathy, having a good relationship with your child so that the inner voice is kind and warm, for us, we have compassion for ourselves. That's called self-compassion. So we recognize that when we're having a hard time, we're human like everyone else, and everyone has hard times, even if their Instagram feeds don't show it. So that's what we do there. In terms of the competence need, that sense that we say to our kids, you've got this, we can actually say that to ourselves. We can reflect and say, okay, I've reached this stage in life and I haven't done it by accident. Like I've actually had successes to get here. You don't stumble from one failure to another. Well, I guess in some ways we kind of do, but our failure, we keep on failing forward, failing up, right? Which means that we're learning, progressing and developing. We're getting better as we go. So we're self-compassionate. We acknowledge that we've actually figured some things out. Therefore, we have the level of competence, a degree of competence to be at this point. And then we recognize that nobody's forcing us to do anything here. We actually have all the choice in the world, even when we feel completely stuck. It might be, I can't leave my job, or I can't leave my town, or I can't do this. You actually can. It's not always wise to throw caution to the wind. I'm not suggesting we do that, but when we recognize that we are choosing every single day, every single hour, every single minute, the life that we'll be in, it gives us a sense that, okay, so I've chosen this. The decisions that I've made at this point have led me to be who I am. Therefore, I have chosen this, even if not all of the choices were mine. I didn't necessarily choose to have a child with additional needs, or I didn't necessarily choose to have a partner who left me. However, the choices up to this point ultimately have brought me to where I am, and I can choose at this point to move forward. I know that's a little bit provocative. It's also a little bit controversial for some, but the intent behind this is if we're kind to ourselves, if we believe in ourselves, and if we start making choices today, we can't change the past, but we can certainly change the future by the choices we make. I guess that's where I'm kind of going with this. We shouldn't be constrained by what's happened. And I think that as we do that and start to have those success experiences and be kind to ourselves, we actually discover that we're not so bad and life is worth living. So that's how I would respond in brief. There's other things like going and getting help, having psychological assistance, getting some cognitive behavioral therapy from a counselor or a therapist. Those kinds of things will also help.
As I've done my own inner work, I've really found that kind of working through that process and striving to actually find my own voice has been so powerful as I've moved forward in my own life and as a mother trying to help my children navigate the challenges that they're experiencing. So today we talked about three things: relatedness, competence, and autonomy. And as we can build those in our children, their inner voice will be one of support, love, and compassion.
Well, and let me emphasize one more thing. Their inner voice will be theirs. When we come from an environment that is controlling and restrictive, that's always putting us down and pointing the direction for what you need to do, and you should have done this and you shouldn't have done that, and you must and you mustn't. And when we have that, that's somebody else's voice intruding into ours. But when we empower our children, when we give them that autonomy, when we give them that belief, when we give them the sense of competence and the sense that they are enough, that we love them as they are, the voice that they hear as they mature will not be ours, it will be theirs, because we've allowed them to have a voice in the first place.
I think that's every parent's hope.
Damn, I feel like that was just an awesome podcast. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rule. I'm from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you want more info about making your family happier, please join us on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, or you can visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.